Good morning. As folks start to file in here for the first of the State Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan webinars. This series will focus on Priority 1, Recreation for All. We are very pleased to welcome Christine Ticehurst, Recreation and Interpretation Program Coordinator with Bureau of State Parks, as well as Shea Zwerver, Executive Policy Specialist in the Policy Office at Dcnr. And we are also pleased to welcome Lizzie Hessek, Program Manager from Pennsylvania Environmental Council. Go through a little bit of housekeeping here. Please note that this presentation is being recorded so that this material will be available after the meeting today. For those of us who aren't familiar with our Zoom meeting toolbar, you will see it on your screen now. Up here at the top, you will see where you can mute yourself, stop your video if you do not want to be seen. Click on the participants link to see who's in the room, and the chat box to chat with the event coordinators as well as the speakers. This is also how we will be handling questions today. So as you think of questions for our speakers, please type them in the chat box and we will deal with them at the end of the presentation. You can also change how you view your speakers. If you would like to view only the person speaking, you can go up to the top right-hand corner of your Zoom window and click on Speaker View. If you'd like to see all the presenters, you can click on Gallery View. With Speaker View, this is how it will look on your screen. You'll get a slightly larger picture of who is speaking at the moment, as well as the presentation. Again, we will be handling all questions at the end of the presentation today. Please use the chat box to type your questions in, and we will deal with them at the end of the presentation. And without further ado, I will turn the presentation over to Christine.
All right, thank you, Carol. All right, let me check, make sure that this is working right. There we go. All right, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited to kick off the first of a number of webinar series for the 2020-2024 Pennsylvania Statewide Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan. So today we're going to be highlighting the priority area known as Recreation for All, and this is really Pennsylvania's plan. Yes, Dcnr has helped kind of shepherd along the planning of this plan, but really before I get started, I just wanted to say thank you to all that were included, specifically the members of the Technical Advisory Committee, survey, and focus group participants for all of their comments and feedbacks to really help shape this plan. So thanks again for all of your feedback. We look forward to moving forward for the next 5 years with this blueprint. So this is the vision of our outdoor recreation plan for 2020-2024. Enjoyable outdoor recreation is welcoming to all and accessible in every Pennsylvania community. There's 5 priorities within the plan, and today we're going to be highlighting Recreation for All. There's 20 recommendations and about 70 actions within this plan. So we encourage all outdoor recreation providers to read the plan and help us implement it over the next 5 years. So a few ways to discover the plan. First is on the Dcnr Outdoor Recreation Plan webpage. There's a story map, an interactive story map to go through. And then you could also request a paper copy to be mailed to you by Lori Ross. And we'll have all of this information up on the website as well as the chat pod for you to access more easily as we go through this today. And just as a note, the plan was approved by the National Park Service just prior to the pandemic and the latest rounds of protests. So we will be considering both when implementing priority actions and encourage all to do the same over the next 5 years and future. So as I mentioned, we're going to have a number of webinars throughout the next 4 weeks. Today we're starting off with the Recreation for All, but we encourage you to please join us over the next 4 weeks to learn more about health and wellness, sustainable systems, funding and economic development, and technology. And all of those dates are listed up on the screen, and you can register for them at your convenience. So we look forward to having you join us later on. All right, so Pennsylvania, the population is really changing. Although we have some slow growth, since 2010, PA's population has grown less than 1% in comparison to about 5% nationally. Our residents are aging. Every county has seen the rise in senior population since 2010. Most counties have fewer children under the age of 18 compared to in 2010. Pennsylvanians are moving from rural counties to urban ones. By 2040, 48 counties are expected to gain population, while 19 are projected to decline. Pennsylvania's challenge is that our public lands are concentrated in the north central region, where a small percentage of our population live. Attendance at many of our state parks in urban areas have doubled have doubled over the past 6 months, and more specifically, even more so due to COVID-19. So those numbers have kind of gone through the roof over the past few months. PA is less diverse than the national average. People of color make up a growing segment of our population. 32% of Pennsylvanians live in underserved communities, also known as environmental justice communities, that have a number of items listed with that community. So where people recreate, we know that people are recreating more closely to home. They have more nearby nature experiences. They visit their local and county parks and trails more than state, federal, and private parks combined. So it makes sense that they're sticking close to nearby their home. We did a survey with Pennsylvanians, and we have about the top outdoor enthusiast activities. Over 8,000 Pennsylvanians responded to our online survey. Hiking and walking are our most popular outdoor recreation activities. The differences by sex and age: more women walk than men, and more men hunt and fish. The over 65 group participates more in passive recreational activities such as wildlife and bird watching. And then in a panel survey of people of color conducted by Penn State for the Bureau of State Parks, a majority of respondents across race and ethnicity agreed or strongly agreed that they felt a sense of welcome and belonging in state parks. However, the sense of welcome and belonging at state parks was higher among white respondents than Black. We learned in our focus groups that going to parks outside of their neighborhoods was concerning due to racism. Many did not feel comfortable in certain recreation areas where they did not encounter many people of color. So we have a disconnect with equitable trail access. Based off our survey data, 69% of Pennsylvanians agree that they can safely access the trail within 15 minutes of where they live. Higher income respondents agreed more than lower. White respondents agreed more than Black Pennsylvanians. So you can see that how there's a disconnect with the access to open space. This plan aims to help reduce those disconnects and increase equitable access to our outdoor recreation amenities in Pennsylvania. So starting off with our first recommendation in Recreation for All, provide opportunities for everyone to regularly engage in outdoor recreation. I just wanted to highlight a paragraph from a recent article published by the Department of Health and Human Services. So they say, outdoor recreation is the most common way that Americans come to know their public lands and waters and develop a stewardship ethic. Everyone in America, no matter where they live, deserves to have access to outdoor opportunities and to have the benefit of nearby green spaces for their mental and physical health. During COVID-19, individuals have relied on outdoor recreation more than ever to provide solace, exercise, or a way to disconnect from stress and reconnect with family. And yet this pandemic has made increasingly clear that not everyone has safe and accessible local green spaces. In particularly, Black and Brown communities are more likely to have fewer outdoor spaces and more barriers to accessing those outdoors. So as we move forward with this plan, we look to utilize that to help overcome some of those barriers and get more people involved in the outdoors and access to those amenities. So Pennsylvania, or for this plan, DCNR worked with the Trust for Public Lands It's the first state in the nation to analyze how many residents have access to local parks within a 10-minute walk of their home. These places in red are the highest need areas across the state. As you zoom into the map, you can highlight and select your local area. On the image up here, we have Dauphin County. We've created an interactive map that you can sort by county and municipality. In a month or so, we'll have another tutorial on how to use this tool, but I encourage you to join our technology webinar, and we'll learn more about how to utilize this map in November. Recommendation number 2, enhance recreational amenities to fit the needs and expectations of underserved people. So I'm going to highlight again another interactive map that you can find on the Dcnr website, and this showcases all of the ADA accessible recreational amenities across our Commonwealth at our state parks. We have a number of ADA fishing and kayak launches, and there are more to be installed as the years go on. We're also looking to make sure people feel comfortable when they are at our parks. So in addition to the ADA kayak launches and the ADA fishing piers, we also want folks to be reminded of how those open spaces are for everyone, and that we have equitable access to the outdoor recreation for everyone. So DCNR, through their Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, is currently working on developing a Nature for All, Let's Adventure Together signage. And the plan is to be installed at information kiosks and trailheads, reminding visitors that we are all welcome at our green spaces and adventure in nature comfortably and safely. Some other interesting partnerships have come together through our health and wellness sort of lens through Recreation for All, and this is an increased awareness of opportunities to be more active in the outdoors. So not everyone can head out and hike the AT. Most people are lucky to have about half an hour, 40 minutes to head out and get some exercise, and many of us individuals are doing that in their local community and neighborhood. This is a fitness trail in conjunction with a local senior center in South Williamsport. So this is a wonderful way to get individuals out, exercise, and encourage their health and wellness, and improve their mental health as well. So lots of really interesting opportunities to make those connections between our open spaces across Pennsylvania. Another item that we're looking to increase are additional loop trails. So whether you're looking to walk around a lake, take a new hiker out for a stroll, everyone loves loops. When you never have to return the way you came, every step feels like an adventure. So through the Recreation for All plan, we hope to get everyone out and explore those new adventures for themselves, safely and enjoyable. I'm going to pass this on to Shea to continue on with our recommendations. So Shea, I'll pass the control to you.
Great, thanks, Christine. I'll be reviewing recommendation 3 and 4. So recommendation 3 in the Rec for All priority is to provide equitable access to outdoor recreation and conservation programs. And equitable access is one thing, but we also need to keep in mind, as Christine talked a lot about, is promoting diversity and inclusion. We have a long way to go to ensure that everyone and all feel welcome on public Pennsylvania lands, and it'll take more than one office and department to do this, but we can start. And in this case, diversity refers to a range of characteristics, including national origin, disability, sexual orientation, gender, socioeconomic, family structure, and language. Okay. So speaking of language, Pennsylvania has a diverse linguistic landscape, which includes more than 20 different languages. Some of the most common besides English are Spanish, Chinese, Dutch, and German. So in the background, there's a screenshot of an interactive interface that Department of Health has available for the public, and it relates to health equity, but it's applicable to any area and any entity that would try to, would like to see what languages are being spoken in a specific or certain location. You can use this map to help you translate signage across your landscapes. It's extremely, using the interactive map there to identify what languages might be spoken in a certain geographic location. You can use that to then help you translate some of your signs you might have. So in the upper right-hand corner of the screen is just an example of a sign to recreate responsibly and welcome to the outdoors that's been translated into another language. And that is a feasible and simple way to make more people feel welcome. Another way to make other people feel welcome is Braille Trails. It's another idea to improve sense and welcome and belonging. A Braille nature trail is a nature trail with Braille informational signs and physical aids that allow the visually impaired to experience the trail unassisted. Braille trails usually include a guide rope for the users to hold on and follow along the path with markers for Braille informational signs. Some trails also have tactile walkways to provide directions. Others have audio components, such as guided audio tours or smartphone access. All right, providing first-time kits and public programs to help those who don't have access to outdoor recreational equipment or who might not be familiar with how to use such equipment is another part of another action step in our 3 recommendation. So the Get Outdoors mini grant could be a great resource to help your community start first-time kits for camping or fishing. Christina has actually done a really great YouTube video on using a kayak, the basics of using a kayak and how to help those learn to use it. Recommendation 4, which is our last recommendation in the Rec for All priority. So build a diverse workforce and volunteer base. I'm sure we're all aware that diversity within the environmental, conservation, and recreational agencies and organizations are not reflective of the population. Take DCNR, for example. So DCNR's workforce is 75% male and 98% white, and has remained largely unchanged for the past 20 years. As of December 31st of 2019, DCNR's salary female workforce was 25%, while minority representation was about 3%. Now the agency, so in 2017, the agency has created a diversity and equity and inclusion work group, and one of their main objectives is to increase diversity among DCNR's workforce. There's a couple of examples I'll share next of how DCNR is doing this. One is the Pennsylvania Outdoor Corps, and the other is the Correctional Conservation Collaborative. So the Pennsylvania Outdoor Corps I'll just mention, it's a job training, work experience, environmental education, professional development for young people who are looking to get involved in the recreational and conservation field. This initiative, it trains new generations of stewards and actively supports DCNR in its effort to diversify its workforce. So usually it was founded in 2016, which started in 5 communities, and now it's expanded statewide. It consists of a 10-month program for young adults, 18 to 25-year-olds, and then a 6-week summer program for youth ages 15 to 18. Although the 2020 summer program was canceled due to COVID, there were still 9 adult crews that were deployed throughout the state to help with projects. They can help with projects beyond just state lands. So to date, the Corps have contributed to over 300,000 hours of service to Pennsylvania's parks, forests, and communities. In 2019, they improved over 90 miles of hiking trails, maintained over 1,400 structures, and inventoried 5,200 trees in communities. The Correctional Conservation Collaborative started in 2017, and that's a vocational training program working with inmates nearing release at state correctional institutions, focusing on natural resource conservation field. And to date, we've trained about 160 inmates, and we have seen a few working in the industry already. So we've had great success in both of these programs already. A couple other ways that our human resources are working to increase diversity in our workforce is to attend careers and job fairs, present to student groups, and conduct classroom presentations. Also expanding partnerships with vocational schools and high schools and colleges and universities. Another action item under recommendation 4 is to create a mentoring program to encourage people from diverse backgrounds to volunteer or pursue careers in this field. The Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission and the Pennsylvania Game Commission already have really great models of mentor programs in place. 2 are pictured here. On the left, you'll have a picture of the trout mentor program or youth fishing mentorship program. And then the Pennsylvania Game Commission started a archery hunt with the John Hines National Wildlife Refuge in Philadelphia. They trained a team of certified hunter mentors, and they were able to go out and do a mentored hunt. This is the last slide for us. These are just ideas to help you do your part to support the Recreation for All plan. And then also if you need to, if you're applying for DCNR grants in the future, this can help you with some of those requirements. And I'll give you a minute to read over theirs. Next, I'm going to introduce Lizzie Hessek from the Pennsylvania Environmental Council, who will take the next time and half of this webinar to present. Lizzie joined PEC in 2013, and she brought her international experience and community development to her work in greenways and trails. Professionally, Lizzie has worked on projects that develop solutions for social and environmental challenges facing communities in France, Brazil, Chile, and the US. Lizzie has also been an apprentice in a letterpress studio in Baltimore, a graphic designer in a museum near Paris, and a jack of all trades at the Blue Mountain Center in the Adirondack State Park. Through her work at PEC, she is able to pursue her passion for creating equitable access to natural resources and recreational assets for Pennsylvania. So Lizzie, I will hand it off to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shea. I always forget how long that bio is until somebody reads it out loud. So thank you for doing that. Okay. I'm going to attempt to share my screen now. And did that work?
Yes.
Fabulous. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining me. I am here representing the circuit trails in Southeast Pennsylvania and the Philadelphia region and bordering into New Jersey, and representing the work that we're doing with Jedi, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. The presentation that I'm going to give you, we're going to talk about how the circuit trails sort of formed its Jedi task force, what we are currently doing in the task force, and the second part of my presentation is some advice taken from one of my colleagues in New Jersey, Eleanor Horn, about things to think about as you take on the work of making trails for all, incorporating elements of this new SCORP plan in the work that we're doing across the state. So we've called our presentation From Talk to Action to Trail Equity. For those of you who aren't familiar with the circuit trails, it is a 800 plus planned mile network of trails that connect Philadelphia and the surrounding 8 counties. About 350 are currently built, so I'm going to round up and say that that's half. It's a really interesting network of very diverse places, both geographically. There's some very rural areas that connect with some very urban areas, as well as demographically. It's highly racially diverse. Obviously, there are a mix of genders and sexualities. And we're really interested in having all of those people come and use our trails and feel like they are welcome in these spaces. That said, all of the Circuit Trails organizations have noticed through the programs that we do and the events that we host, just the way that we interact with people in our networks, that a lot of the people that we are succeeding at reaching are fairly homogenous. They tend to be white, often they are male, and we realize that we're not doing well enough at reaching our mission of creating spaces that attract all people, specifically all Pennsylvanians and all Philadelphians, etc. So we started about in 2017 trying to ask ourselves as a coalition of organizations what we can be doing, what we should be looking at, what best practices. The first thing we did was send out a survey to our coalition members asking, how much do you think about these issues of equity and justice, and what do you think, or do you think we could be doing more? And as you can see from these survey results, people were thinking about these questions all the time and thought that we could be doing more. So that sort of set Peck and our partners out with a lot of energy to take on this work. The first thing we did after that survey was put together an inclusive trail planning report of best practices and case studies from other communities sort of across the Eastern Seaboard that had similarities to the Circuit Trails network. A big part of that was just defining our terms. So even throughout this webinar today, you've been hearing about inclusion and equity, but really thinking about what those mean. So thinking of inclusive trail planning as being a prioritization of participation of people who have typically not been engaged in the trail planning process. And then equitable trail planning, specifically focusing on access. The idea of access is going to change depending on what communities you're talking about. Access, for example, for somebody who has ability issues is going to be a different set of considerations and challenges to people of color who are not necessarily accessing the spaces that white people feel comfortable in. So it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all. It's a very complicated set of questions, but it's inside that complication and inside those details that you get really rich solutions to these problems that we're all aware are challenging our organizations. So after we put together the Inclusive Trail Planning Toolkit, we wanted to share what we learned with our Circuit Trail partners, which we did at a series of workshops, which you see here. One of the outcomes of these workshops that we did with our Circuit Trail members, there were full day workshops. We had really in-depth conversations about the work that we could be doing. We decided that the Circuit Trails needed to incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion into the strategic plan, and that we wanted to have a task force within the Circuit Trails Coalition that was specifically thinking about issues of Jedi. So what is Jedi, you ask? I said this before, I kind of ruined my own punchline, but it's justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Again, thinking about all of these as separate concepts that all work together to create trails for all. The Jedi Task Force, that is a subset of the Circuit Trails Coalition, has for its sort of makeup, it's about 11 of the Circuit Trails organizations that meets regularly. The whole membership of the Circuit Trails meets semi-annually, twice a year, and then the steering committee meets monthly. Our Jedi Task Force meets bi-monthly, and we talk about issues that have come up in the steering committee meetings in our organizations and ways that we can inform the greater Circuit Trails Coalition. I'm from the Pennsylvania Environmental Council, and we help to coordinate these, but we are certainly not the leaders. There's not one organizational leader. We all take turns in an effort to sort of break down the hierarchy and understand that all of the organizations that are coming to the table have something really valuable to offer. So our main goals as a Jedi task force, again, this sort of subset of the greater Circuit Trails Coalition that is specifically thinking every other month about issues of equity and inclusion in the work that we're doing as a coalition. Our goals are to add capacity to the greater coalition, knowing that a lot of our partner organizations are small teams, are doing very specific work with a very limited budget. Knowing that we can serve as a sort of added capacity to help organizations that want to be doing equity work have that resource. We want to create tools for these organizations to use. Again, so this is an added capacity, but in a very concrete way. The tools, as you'll see in the next slide, might be translated materials, as Shea mentioned just a couple minutes ago. Or the Inclusive Trail Planning Toolkit in of itself is a new tool that people can use to inform the work that they're doing. I have create tools on here twice. That's a mistake. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what was supposed to be there. So we have a lot of tools. And then the last thing is a cohesive approach. So again, acknowledging that all of the organizations within the coalition are thinking about doing this work, helping us all to come together as a coalition to address issues of diversity and equity and inclusion within our trail planning as one voice. So the task force can take that on as something that we are giving back to the greater coalition. So we have 3 subcommittees within the task force. A communications subcommittee, which is coordinating with the communications task force, which is a separate task force within the Circuit Trails Coalition. We have a PR firm. We work with Braille Trails to do sort of newsletters and media, and making sure that both the work of the Jedi task force is getting shared with folks so they know what opportunities are out there, what tools are available for them to use, as well as making sure that the media that we're putting out about the circuit trails is inclusive of all of the populations that we're interested in engaging with. Another subcommittee within the task force is the research and data subcommittee, which we, as I mentioned, have anecdotal evidence about the folks that we are interacting with as trail organizations, but we don't actually have a lot of data. I'm super excited about the maps that Christine, you were showing us before, having that countywide data and the municipality-wide data about the 15-minute walk to trails is awesome. So that's like a huge component of understanding what is out there and who is using it. We are currently, as we speak, engaging in trail intercept surveys and focus groups in the Circuit Trails region to try to get some more numbers and qualitative data as well around who's using trails and who's not using trails and why folks who aren't using trails aren't, so that we can incorporate that data into planning our programming and our trail development. And then finally, the third subcommittee of the task force is the New Resources Subcommittee. That is focusing a lot on translating the Circuit Trails materials. As you saw a couple minutes ago, Pennsylvania is linguistically very diverse, and a huge barrier to understanding what is out there for you to recreate on is not being able to read the information that's going out about it. So we're first working on Spanish, because as you saw, that is about 8% of Pennsylvania writ large speaks Spanish as a first language, but here in the Philadelphia region, we also have a lot of Southeast Asian languages and African languages that we're hoping to also incorporate into those new resources. That's the same slide. Yes, so a few words of advice. These are coming from Eleanor Horn. As I mentioned, she is a colleague of mine in New Jersey. New Jersey is part of the Circuit Trails, even though I feel badly for anybody who's not from Pennsylvania, we do try to lift them up. So Eleanor's pretty brilliant, and she's thought a lot about the work around promoting DEI in the recreation work that we're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and take her words from her, and I hope that they will be helpful to you. And first of all, the words that we use are key. As we mentioned, the concepts are all very different, and understanding exactly what you mean when you're saying them, even when you're talking about wanting to promote diversity. Are we talking about racial diversity? Are we talking about ability diversity or gender diversity? Being really concrete about what these things are will not just help folks to feel more included, but also help the programs that we are developing to actually address the issues that we're feeling challenged by. Thinking about considering intersectionality. Those words are important, but there's also overlap where those words come together. Having a identity connected to your gender and identity connected to your race are not mutually exclusive. How do those identities complicate each other, and how do we address them? Thinking about our own perspectives that we bring to the table, both our perspectives and the people that we're speaking to. So Eleanor's example here is at a trail or a park that might feel safe to some, might not feel safe to others. Another example that I think is when we're thinking about the ways to use trails and the ways to use recreational spaces, we are coming to that understanding of spaces based on our past experiences, but opening up to think about new ways or creative ways to use space is a way to engage new audiences as well. To start at the beginning, thinking about this Jedi work should happen right at the beginning of planning stages, right at the beginning of programming, having to sort of shoehorn it in at the end when maybe there are biases that get baked in is going to make it more difficult. So starting your planning with this filter of equity is pretty important. And also centering equity, making sure that we're starting at the beginning, and in everything that we do, we have this pivot point of making sure that people are feeling included, that we are thinking about issues of access as we are pushing forward different recreational infrastructure or programming. And also thinking about what we are prioritizing. This work, I think that there is an idea that diversity work, equity work is a nice to have, that it's something that we add on to the end, but we can, and in that sometimes there's an idea that we don't have enough money or capacity to do some of this work because it is a nice to have. But if we think about equity as central to the work that we are doing and that we make it a priority, we will be able to find the funding. One thing that I have found really helpful in the work that I'm doing is talking to our funders, both at Dcnr and also some of the private funders that we work with in Southeast Pennsylvania. People are all really interested in promoting Trails for All. And so if you are feeling like it is something that you want to take more seriously within your own organization and within your own projects, you might have more allies out there than you realize right now if you just start a conversation with the people who are able to fund that type of work. Also, ignoring the trends. Right now, I think we're all aware there is a lot of media about diversity and equity, which is super important, and the fact that it's top of mind is fantastic, but it's probably going to go away. Because that's the nature of our media cycles, but remembering that this isn't a trend, that inviting all people to share in these spaces with us is something that should be just part of the work that we do at its base. So making sure we don't think about this as responding, but as starting with and incorporating. Educating ourselves for two reasons. One is because as we talk about doing diversity work and equity work, we might have pushback. For example, people thinking that it is a nice to have. So coming armed with some extra information about how increasing diversity in trail usage, for example, also increases economic benefits in communities, or within our own organizations, having a diverse workforce increases creativity and revenue. So there's a lot of other reasons just besides it is the right thing to do that can help convince people that focusing on Jedi issues is important. Secondly, educating ourselves means to just constantly be open to realizing that we have ignored our own perspectives or taken something for granted and feeling comfortable being challenged. It's deeply uncomfortable, but just being ready to have our own assumptions challenged. And preparing for frustration comes out of that. This was a great quote from Eleanor, that the sad fact is that almost universally, organizations change as little as they must rather than as much as they should. So knowing that we're in this for the long game. And finally, not giving up, that there is going to be frustration, but the tide of history is sort of on the side of creating more inclusion and more access for all peoples, and that we should not think that the tide is the current. So even if we get frustrated, moving forward and knowing that this is good work that is making Pennsylvania's trails and outdoor spaces better for everybody. So with that, I am opening the whole panel back up to questions that might have come through in the chat box.
Yes, so at this point, we haven't had anything come through the chat box, so now would be the time. If you have questions for any of our panelists, Shea, Christine, or Lizzie, please either type them in the chat box, or I'm open to, if you raise your hand, I can unmute you to ask your question live if you would prefer to do it that way. And as the slide on the screen currently says, the webinar and slides will be posted on the Dcnr Recreation Plan page after the recording has completed. And the contact information for each of our speakers is on the screen as well. I will also type everything into the chat box so that you have it available to you after the course of this presentation today.
May I ask a question to my Dcnr panelists?
Of course.
In your presentation, you mentioned that Pennsylvania's population is becoming more urban. that's a demographic trend. And at the same time, the map that you showed of distance to public spaces and to recreational spaces, it seemed like most of the red areas were concentrated in the northern tier of Pennsylvania and some of the more rural areas. That strikes me as a mismatch, and I'm wondering if DCNR has two separate plans to address the rural versus urban disparities.
That is a very good observation and a very good question. Yeah, Diane, maybe you want to chime in on this to speak sort of on the plan for DCNR, but that is very accurate. I mean, many of our open spaces are in north central Pennsylvania, which are very forested, but the population is lower. But we do have parks in and around urban areas, and those are being visited at record-breaking numbers right now. So yes, we have some plans in place. So Diane, if you would like to chime in, that'd be very helpful.
So hello everyone, this is Diane Krippes from DCNR's Bureau of Recreation and Conservation, and one of the co-leaders of implementing the outdoor recreation plan. Lizzie, that's a great question. We have just gotten this information over the past 6 months, and we are digesting all of it now. So when you go on and look at this interactive map, it presents a very interesting story for every county. So we have already reached out to Dauphin County, and we'll be talking to county planners about this information and how it could be applied from one county to the next, similar to how we worked with counties to do county greenway and open space plans. We envision a future in which we will work with counties to do recreation access plans. So there are a lot of complexities in Pennsylvania's landscape, and the red is showing up in a lot of rural areas where you can't access a local park within 10 minutes, a 10-minute walk. It's just not possible with the road system that we have. But we also have challenges in the urban areas. So a place like the city of Reading has a 99% access rate, but some of their parks may not be safe, clean, and ready to use, or may be smaller than needed in a particular community. So we will have more information about this new interactive access map in our technology webinar that's later in November, and I encourage you to come back and learn more about this new access map at our technology webinar.
Great.
Does that help you, Lizzie?
Yeah, that's awesome, and I'm super excited about all the technology that you guys showed off today.
All right, we have some questions starting to come through now. So question number 1, can you give some examples on infrastructure that has been installed? And in those rural areas, are there issues with vandalism?
So would you like to take that also, Christine?
I can respond to a portion of that.
You take what you can, and then I might add to.
Thanks. Yep, I can certainly speak on vandalism. Definitely in light of our overuse and visitation due to COVID restrictions and opportunities for people being home and wanting outdoor spaces. Yes, we have visitors that are coming out at record numbers, but we're also having visitors who are coming and destroying some of our, graffiti, vandalism, restroom destruction, lots of stuff. So that's the one portion I can respond to. So that's sort of heartbreaking to see. So we're trying to navigate through that as best as we can. But Diane, if you want to chat on some of the infrastructure responses, I can kind of fill in the blanks as we go from there.
So to add to what Christine said, my years of experience in the park and recreation world is to address the vandalism as quickly as possible. And that's hard when we are down staff and have limited resources, but it's important to work with volunteers and others as quickly as possible to clean up whatever vandalism was left and not to let it unattended, because then it just gets worse. So that is the tried and true advice of many, many decades of there's no magic bullet to fixing vandalism. We're having a lot of new users in our parks, and certainly encouraging the principles of leave no trace and trying to do more education on how to use our outdoor spaces responsibly. And then, Carol, what was the second part of that question?
It was, can you give some examples on infrastructure that has been installed?
I'm not exactly sure where that question is going in terms of, the infrastructure for more diverse populations. Is that what you think it might be, Carol?
So Emily, if you'd like to clarify that part of your question in the chat, we can come back to that. In the meantime, we have a comment from Arden to all panelists. Arden says, thank you for persisting to be inclusive. I'm a Black middle-aged female who lives in southeastern PA, and we do not have access to many nature programs in our local state parks. And until I hear back from Emily, I will move on to question 2. And this one is for Lizzie. How did you go about finding individuals representing the demographics that you are trying to feel more welcome? Meaning, do you have individuals of color or other diversities participating on the Jedi Task Force?
Yeah, it's a great question. The Jedi Task Force itself is a subset of the Circuit Trails organizations. So the task force is, to some extent, we can't become any more diverse than the Circuit Trails organizations already are, right? And that is also something, like, we're very aware, like everyone on this panel is white, and most of the people that I work with are white, not all, and most of the people in the Circuit Trails organizations are too. There's, right now, there's actually a bunch of organizations within the Circuit Trails Coalition who are hiring, and there's been a, like, concerted, I don't want to say effort necessarily because I'm not participating in any of these job searches, but to look to diverse candidates, because we know that diversifying our workforce is a huge part of diversifying the work that we're doing. But it is something that we're aware we're not doing well enough right now, or that as the status quo exists, it's not good enough. So that's sort of a writ large about the Circuit Trails Coalition organizations. But as far as the people that the task force is engaging in some of the other work that we are doing, so we're doing the data collection right now, and we've been working with a sort of professional surveying organization who's familiar with the communities around our area, and we've been working with community leaders and community organizations within the places that we are focusing on for data collection, in order to ask folks to volunteer their time to focus groups. Or we're actually giving stipends to the people who are participating in focus groups, but volunteering to do trail intercept surveys. So there's an element of self-selection. There's also a really excellent article in the New York Times from Monday about people of color being sort of expected to take on DEI work in their organizations and their corporations, and how that's not necessarily something that folks are interested in doing, and it could be traumatizing even. But so if you're interested to try to find that article from this Monday in the New York Times, it had some really interesting insights. But as far as what we are doing, we are really hoping that there's a self-selection of people who sort of raise their hand to participate in the task force if they're interested in it, as we're also looking to diversify within the hiring practices of the Circuit Trails.
Okay, thank you. I did get some clarification from Emily, but before we move back to that, I think there's another question here for Lizzie. Do you know of organizations representing underserved or minorities in the Circuit Trails area promoting outdoor rec for those groups?
So the Bicycle Coalition of Philadelphia does a pretty, of Greater Philadelphia, they have a lot of really interesting programs that are hoping to engage or looking to engage people of color, as well as they have a whole Spanish-speaking effort as well. They have a program called Spokes and Folks, which engages non-cis male folks as well. So the Bicycle Coalition, I think, has done some really interesting programming. We are at PEC starting a partnership with Outdoor Afro, which is a nationwide organization that has local chapters, and the Pennsylvania chapter will be doing programming to help people of color interact with the Schuylkill River and the Youghiogheny River as well. We're super excited that they were interested in partnering with us. So there are organizations and groups as well that are specifically identifying, I think, a challenge, I'm speaking of course as a white woman, but I think a challenge for people of color to engage with the outdoors is even like in addition to access issues, in addition to education, perhaps there's just a feeling of not being invited, as we saw in DCNR's data, that people who respond that the spaces are for me are overwhelmingly white. So there are organizations in this area that acknowledge that and are doing work to address that, and those two being two of them.
Thank you.
To add on to that, I believe there's another group called Get Outdoors Philadelphia, led by two sisters, Tasha and Tarsha Scovin, who work with youth in the Philadelphia area to get engaged in outdoor recreation activities as well as environmental education. So that's another group to look at.
Oh, and also there are many of the nature centers around Philadelphia, at least in the Cobbs Creek Environmental Center and the Overbrook Environmental Center, as well as John Hines National Wildlife Refuge, are also trying to engage their local communities as well, which is some really interesting programming coming out of there as well, such as the Pennsylvania Game Commission project in the Hines Refuge that DCNR showed a couple minutes ago.
Great, thank you. So going back to the question on infrastructure and vandalism, Emily was referring specifically to Braille signage, additional signage, wheelchair ramps, etc. These are all things that cost money to install only to get destroyed. It's extremely frustrating. Christine, I don't know if you want to address that at all.
Sure. Yep, I'll address it to the extent that I can. Yes, you're right. They are more expensive to install. We do have a plan for the agency to increase our ADA access for fishing and kayak launches, as well as ADA access from parking lots to our trail access. So that is on our radar, and that's sort of baked into our planning and updates, facility updates throughout the Commonwealth. But again, you know, the vandalism component of it, you're going to find that across the board, unfortunately. But back to Diane's comment about the volunteers that are working in those local parks, they really are wonderful, and we can't thank them enough for helping to do those cleanups or to help raise money to reinstall vandalized ramps or stolen materials or broken signs. But Shea or Diane, if you want to add anything else, please feel free.
So this is Diane. I would add that the installation of security cameras is something that is happening more often in urban areas. And so sometimes I had heard there was a lot of vandalism along the Schuylkill River Trail in a parking lot. Don't tell anyone, but they put signs up that they had video cameras, and there actually weren't any there. But that has worked to help decrease car break-ins. So it's important that our areas have sufficient lighting, have the additional cameras and support and connections to the local police departments to try to address the vandalism. Vandalism tends to come in spurts. It happens for a while, and then the winter season comes. It slows down. It's important to get, I said earlier, to get those signs, the effects of vandalism fixed for the next season, and hope that the vandals have moved on to something else. So that would be the only additional advice I would have. It is extremely frustrating. Completely agree. And there's nothing more frustrating to volunteers to put a whole lot of hours of time into it and having it damaged in one evening. So certainly welcome anyone else's suggestions to add in the chat box, because we're all facing this, and anyone else has solutions out there, it'd be great information to share.
So I'd also like to add that, like, in addition to lighting and call boxes being good ways to not prohibit, but prevent vandalism, those are also in general great ways to increase a perception of safety in these spaces. Even when, trails are not necessarily more or less safe than the areas that they run through, there could be a perception that they are less safe, especially for people of color or women or people who are used to feeling unsafe in public spaces. Then having adequate lighting, having to the extent that it's possible, cell phone coverage. Those are other ways to just make the space feel safer in general for everybody.
Great. So now we move to funding. I don't know if there's anyone on the panel who could take this question, but could DCNR offer additional funding for those more urban areas for nonprofit partners to provide more accessible green space to their populations?
So I would encourage the person who asked the question to contact our DCNR regional advisor in the region in which you're calling from. So we have regional advisors across Pennsylvania. You can email me if you don't know who your regional advisor is. You can check on DCNR's website, or you can email me at dcrippus@pa.gov, or Christine or Shea or any of them on the, on the slide here. We can get you that information on who to talk to. So DCNR is providing funding to Let's Go Outdoors. That's the program that Christine mentioned. So we are open for accepting applications from nonprofits, from organizations who have ideas to help us encourage more experience in the outdoors by all people. So that's how I would respond to it, Carol.
Great, thank you. And then one final question, is there a way to zoom into areas on the outdoor rec and access need maps? If anyone wants to take that now, or we could just direct this questioner to join us on November 5th for the technology session.
Well, the quick answer is yes. So this is an interactive map. And so there is data at the county level, and there's also data at the municipal level, and you can zoom in to where you live, and the information is by census tract, and you can see where access is needed in your own municipality. So the areas that are in red and orange are high and medium need areas, and those are areas that DCNR, and hopefully with our county local planning partners, we'll be trying to do what we can to try to create more green space in those areas that don't have green space.
Great. And this is pretty much perfect timing. We have reached the end of our questions here for today. So again, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. I'd like to thank our speakers once again, Shea, Christine, and Lizzie. Again, their contact information is on the screen, and I did pop it in the chat a little bit earlier. If you have any questions for them that you think of after the course of the presentation today, please feel free to reach out to them. And join us back here next time for, I believe our next one is Sustainable Systems on Thursday, October 22nd. If you need the invitation for that session emailed to you directly, I am happy to do so. Email me at cgrayshaw@weconservepa.org. The information is also available on DCNR's website. You can find it there as well. Thank you all again for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.